Hello, Jen. How are you doing? Yes, I'm all right, thank you. Yeah. What have you been up to lately? Mm. It does. It does. Even if it's cold and sunny, I feel like I could be cold all day if the sun's shining. Yeah. So impactful. We're not used to it, are we, in March? So it's felt like, yeah, I've had a lot of conversations with people about it. Like, what's going on?
I find that it's so much harder to do work, work, and like sitting down and writing work when it's sunny. Because I'm like, "Oh, but
Yeah,
the exciting thing that has happened is that we've both been working on sort of different online type things to do with work.
true.
And one of the things that I've been doing over the past 2 weeks is creating a Substack because we've heard you are only the in people if you have a Substack. Okay, there's something about that, isn't there?
All over
You
it.
are really like, I know who I am. I know who I am. And I'm also racing my husband to create one as well. So
Oh, really? He's making one
he,
as well.
he already has one, but
Okay.
he wants to develop. And
Jen,
so I'm
tell us what
like,
a Substack is because this was new news to me even
yeah.
just like a few weeks ago.
So a Substack is like a cross between a blog and a newsletter.
Okay.
So if you remember, like back in the day, we had blogs where people would kind of update. This is what's been going on. This is what I've been thinking. I'm sharing some photos.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'd be really personal blogs. Sometimes they'd be sort of themed around something in particular.
Yeah.
And it's a cross between that and a newsletter where every week or every month or every quarter you get an email or something paper copy saying here I am updating you on the
Mm,
news. So a
nice.
Substack comes into your email or you can read it online. And it's that cross between that sort of slightly longer piece of writing than just bullet points of here are all the things that we've been doing. It's often much more
Mm.
reflective and more sort of I've been musing on this one thought rather than here are 10 updates for you. But it's also a little bit less insular than blogs.
Man, I'm really glad I asked you because I just feel like I learned some stuff. I know you're building our Substack, but so I feel like I'm, because I've been working on the website, like
Yeah.
on the other side of things for
Now, I'm
us.
not going to ask you to tell us what a website is. I feel like we shouldn't do that. But what is it that I guess we're hoping for from our website?
Yeah, so I got our, so funny, interesting experience, should we say. I got our website audited because I was concerned that it wasn't maybe as good as it could be. And the guy that audited it, so when we launched as a startup 2 years ago, and I built the website because that was the sort of space that we were in. And so I asked him for feedback, what's the messaging like? His feedback was not good. And then eventually I said, oh, because I built this website. And he said, yeah, you did, which was absolutely shocking. So I was like, oh no, I'm so proud of it until he said that. And then I wasn't proud of it. So yeah, he's been helping us. He's just, I think, just to be clear who we are, what we do. And, we just want to be um, clearly available to those that need us, and that those that particularly, our core work is working with young people with severe learning disabilities who self-injure. So if there's people that, if there's young people that are struggling and they don't know about it, it's like we just feel a responsibility to sort that out. So that's been the goal. But as part of it, I also created this little intro video. So I've seen them on other people's websites and they're super cute, and often they're not like highly edited. Like literally, I saw one the other day from some people who were quite influential, and it was just her and her mate in the garden, and they'd obviously just shot it on their phone and put it up on the internet on their website, and they were just chatting about the work. Now we haven't gone quite that chill, but yeah, I did just make like an intro video to explain who we are in our kind of style. But every time you make content like that, I I'm in a habit now. We just make the content and we put it out there because I know that's the job and that's what we need to do the work that we do. But it is like a vulnerable process, isn't it? Because it's like it comes out of your heart. It comes out of your your gut. Like this is who we are. This
Yeah.
is like the space that we want to occupy in the world. And then you put it out there into this into this huge space. You don't know where it's going to go. You don't know who's going to watch it, and it feels very exposing. And yeah, you can. I think what I've learned is like just not to dwell on that, like
Yeah.
not to think about it. Um, but it does. You have this like slight loss of safety moment with all of these things.
Yeah, because you don't know, and it's very easy, I think, for your mind to wander and go, of course this isn't going to go well.
Yeah.
Of course someone else could have done better, or it's going to be misinterpreted, or anything like that.
Yeah. And it's really difficult, isn't it, with that whole, because I know on the website people need to see pictures of you and me because they, most people hear about us through conferences and speaking and so they need, once they get on the website, they need to see pictures of you and me
Yeah.
so they know they're in the right place as much as anything. And then they need to see pictures of what we're doing so that they can see what the sorts of things we're up to. Like I can say, you know, I do speak at conferences, or I can just pop a picture up there and then people know. Like it's like how you communicate, but it doesn't, it feels weird. And it feels like a little bit like a little bit of lost safety, which brings us on neatly to one of the
Safety.
safety, safety and trauma relationship between the two of them. And we started talking last week, didn't we, about like these sort of five principles behind trauma informed care and how they get it's not the goal of trauma informed care is not to embed it at the what's often called like the dyad level, so the level between one person and another. So it's not that if I'm a carer, that we're trying to embed it at the carer to the young person, so it's the young person with learning disabilities. That's not it. That like we do need safety there, but in order to have safety there, we have to have safety all the way through the system. And so we started talking about that. So yeah, it would be good to think about. I think safety is it's all like I want to say it's everything. Like it's so important for anybody having any chance really of recovering from traumatic experiences. But it's not a straightforward concept. Is it? It's not a
Yeah.
straightforward idea or an
We
because
talk
it's
about this quite a lot at home because my husband
right.
works in car seat safety, so not like car seats that kids sit in, but the seats in cars. And
Mm,
I will often say, "Oh, something is more safe," and he'll be like,
right.
"No, no, you can't have more safe. You have safe or not safe. You have safety or not safety, and you can have. It has been tested to be safe at a greater level. It can tolerate more stress and therefore is safer under that stress than something else is. But you can't have this is more safe than this is that." Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Wow. That's really interesting. And that's on the like very concrete level of car seats.
Yeah. And it then becomes interesting because it questions what it is that we believe about ourselves. Do we feel actually I am safe or not safe? Is that
Yeah.
black and white? Or do we notice with this person, I feel safe in this relationship, but I don't with this person? Does it still stay at that kind of black and white, safe, not safe? Or do we notice in ourselves we can tolerate more and more stress because in certain situations there is more capacity for us to be safe? It feels interesting when we think on a big organisational level as well as just individually what is happening between us two. I think safety,
Yeah.
just the word of it, just brings up so much, and maybe we need to really drill in first of all to what we're talking about when we say safety.
Yeah, and it isn't something that you can just map out on a piece of paper. It is experienced. I remember when I went for my Churchill interview and I was talking about going to the US and learning about their TIC programs, and they said, "Why can't you do that online?" And I said, because the foundation of trauma-informed care is safety, and you have to experience safety. I need to go over and see what it feels like. And they were like, okay, that's fine. Off you go. That was the clincher. But it's true. You can't, you can feel it, or you can't. And I also think what's difficult to think and to talk about this is that some people, now not probably not as many people as we would want, but this has been a sustained experience in the West over the last few decades, that many people live with have been raised and grown up, and they've never really had their sense of safety like compromised in a sustained way. So they might have had moments when they felt scared or moments when they felt intimidated, but they pretty much regulate consistently back into a place of feeling safe. And if that has been your experience, you don't notice. So we just don't notice that we feel safe. A little bit like you don't, like I think COVID is such a beautiful illustration. We didn't notice that we were breathing until COVID came along. And then we and then we noticed. And if you think about this number of conversations that we have about breath and breathe, like for me, it just comes up all the time now in a way it didn't pre-COVID. People will say, I'm grateful that I'm breathing. I don't like that wasn't a thing before. So we didn't notice that it was a thing to breathe easily in and out. And then most of us had an experience of COVID, even if it was mild, and it affected our breathing. And I remember I had mild COVID first time round, and I remember just feeling my breath wheezing, and the breath wheezing in and out of my lungs, and suddenly breathing was a thing. I had not noticed. I'd lived all those years, not noticed I was breathing, and suddenly I noticed. And that's very much like safety. We don't notice that we're safe until we're not in a sustained way, and then we know what loss of safety feels like.
This also feels so very different. The other side is if we have grown up in a place.
Yeah.
And so for the majority of somebody's life, things haven't felt safe physically.
Yeah.
Haven't felt safe relationally.
Yeah.
Idea of my day.
Yeah. And that's their ordinary experience. So it's not, they're not aware that that's unusual, or that's an unusual way of growing up. And I think, we do often hear, don't we, conversations, particularly from the older generation, who are sort of baffled by the levels of anxiety or mental health breakdown. Like, well, it wasn't like this in our day. And I feel like, well, partly it was, and you didn't name it, but partly it wasn't. Partly there has been, just not loads of time, because we're only talking from the sort of 60s on. There has been sustained decades where, like, the experience of being raised and broadly feeling safe was, was common. It wasn't everybody's experience, it was common. And I think that does make it hard to understand why that isn't happening so often for this, like, incoming generation. So, but what we do know is whether safety was normal for you or whether loss of safety was normal for you, there is a hard wiring inside of every person where they will pursue an experience of safety. They will go after it. If they see it, if they experience it, if they feel it, they'll want more of that. So if you find a safe person, even if that's the first really safe person you've ever met, you're going to want to be with them.
We've got a challenge at the moment because my son is at nursery. He only ever wants to be with his keyboard.
Right.
Won't go near anybody else. Tries when she goes to the toilet. Tries when she goes to lunch. And she's quite worried about it. She's going to say, is he like this at home? What's going on? Why is he like this?
Mm-hmm.
And each time we drop him in, we're saying, well, he's safe with you.
Yeah.
He's safe with you. And at the moment, the rest of nursery feels like, I don't know if it's safe because I haven't been there long enough. I don't know what.
Yeah.
But he has gravitated towards her, and as soon as he sees her in the morning, he knows, okay, today is going to be okay. I am safe because she's looking after me. And it reminds me so much of some of the people that we work with, where they will find somebody within school, within residential provision, wherever it is, that person provides it. That
Yeah.
person working alongside them is offering, I am holding in this moment.
Yeah, and that's such a beautiful example, Jen, because I think so, when we're thinking about embedding safety into an organization, of course we're starting with things like, the physical bit, like the car seat situation. So physically, have we got safety? Because, if you're going to walk through a gate and get a splinter because it's not well looked after, that begins to erode safety. If you're going to trip over something because the ground is wobbly, that doesn't. All those things do erode safety. And the systems and the processes need to be safe as well. But ultimately, what creates safety are people and relationships. And that your boy's experience of that is classic, isn't it? That he's not concerned about like falling over. He's concerned about falling over and there being a go-to person that he can run to and feel like they've got him. And um and I think what makes, and that's why the trauma informed care piece is absolutely embedded in relationships, not processes. Think about that, like the sort of behavioral process where you identify the function of the behavior and then you put some things in to mitigate it or to lessen that happening. It's a process, it's an ABC, but trauma informed care is all wrapped up in this. What you're describing is your son's attachment process, aren't you? That he's transferred his very deep and important attachment to you and your husband, and he's found a secondary attachment in nursery, and she's safe, and that was going to take some time to settle in before he can feel like he's got enough of a pattern to do it again. It's going to take time. um but yeah, that safety piece is really about finding people that hold us and that where we can feel like somebody's got us. And that's not easy, is it, to establish into a culture or into a setting? Yeah.
And it feels like it goes against so much of what the world says. That like, be independent, you can do it, off you go, you're brilliant, of course you'll succeed. All of those kind of statements on mugs. I've got this.
Yeah.
All of that kind of thing. Because that is putting us into a very insular state of survival is solely on you as a person.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm interested what this looks like on a whole organisational level. Because so much of TIC is, as we said earlier, just not about this happening between two people here. It's about what is happening throughout the whole organisation. And I wonder, from what you saw, what would safety look like when it's bigger than just two people?
Yeah. I think primarily it's a shift in mindset to understand that. So the US used this term human services, which feels a bit weird in the UK. I kind of like the idea that there's a common humanity between everybody. This is people serving people and relating to people. This is essentially the work that we're talking about. And so I think there's something around the understanding that everybody involved in the work, in care work, is a unique person and needs to be seen as such. And that maybe sounds fairly ordinary or basic, but I think we often think, like maybe even unconsciously, but organisations often treat particularly direct care staff or support staff, as a resource, as something that can easily um, uh, like be replaced, that we've got, so we need 20 staff. Oh, we're just going to recruit 20 staff as
Yeah.
if as if it's like building blocks, or as if it's something we just need to get this in the door as a resource. But that's not, that's 20 people with 20 experiences and hearts and minds and bodies that need to feel safe and cared for. And I remember a friend of mine a little while back told me about this word that I hadn't heard before that's really lovely. It's this word fungible. And she said that the thing about care staff is that we treat them as if they're fungible, and they're not. And I was like, what is that word? And I actually taught it to a care team recently because I find it so useful. So she said, so if you have uh, I don't know, like a barrel of oil, and I steal your barrel of oil, but then I give you another barrel of oil. It's neither here nor there. They're all just barrels of oil, and therefore they're fungible. You can take one and you can put another one back in, and nobody's lost anything. But if I steal your dog and I replace it with the exact same pedigree dog, that's not okay. That's not okay, because it wasn't a dog, it was my dog that I had a relationship with, and therefore it's not fungible. So fungible is not the same as replaceable. It means that there's something intrinsic to the thing or the person. Or even you could say, if you stole my necklace that my grandma had gave me, and you gave me the exact same necklace back, that would not be, I'd be like, no, I want the original one back, because she handed it to me and it means something to me. So there's this idea of fungibility, and this is like, so we might completely get on board with the idea that, people need to be valued as they are, but often the systems inside organizations do not behave like that. So a staff member puts in their notice and the system's response is, that's fine, we'll just recruit, as if they can be replaced like a barrel of oil, rather than what they really were, which was a series of relationships that cannot be replaced. And I remember talking to a care team, and one of the care team members was saying to me, I'm so frightened that I'm just going to be managed out. I feel like I'm just going to get managed out of this organization. And I said to her, you're not replaceable. And she said, I am. You can just recruit. She said, you can replace me anytime you like. And I said, no, you're not. Your relationships, your understanding of the system and the house, I said, how long have you known these young people? She was like, oh, some of them I've known like 8 years. And I was like, I can't replace that. Can you see that? And what made me sad in that moment is that no one had ever pointed that out to her. And therefore she felt frightened. She felt frightened in the system because she felt like that she was just she was a job that was being done. She was functioning as a resource in the organization, and rather than being understood as someone who had that would be a loss if she went. She would be a lot. I couldn't replace what she brought to the young people that she was caring for, and I think that's a real significant loss of safety when we do not when we treat our staff. We might look after them, we might have a T's and C's and all these different, but actually how we function in our responses to them is as if they are a resource rather than a person who's offering relationships that can't be replaced. So I think that means that we begin to run organisations in a very different way. That we are the sort of quality control piece where we want to make sure that good care is happening to the young people is not about somebody ticking the boxes, but actually about what the quality of relationship that they're able to offer to their colleagues and to the people that they're serving. And that starts to become the gold that the organisation understands that they have. And that's how we begin to, like, that's the value that we place on people. And I think that starts to establish safety in a team, because they also can make a choice, like, is that the work they want to do? Because
Yeah.
some people do they want to treat a care job like they are a resource that comes in. I'm going to do my job, I'm going to tick the boxes, and I'm going to go home and going to forget about it. But that isn't the work. And so yeah, I think it's like thinking about all of those different levels of safety. But it does get complicated, because that also means we start to value the the different relationships. So if we think about a child who's maybe in social care setting in a children's home, and that they would have different relationships with each staff member. Of course they would, because they're a person, they're a human, and we
Yeah.
all have different quality of relationship with all the different people around us. That means that the organisation begins to actually value that, and rather than treating it as a dysfunction. So we often, particularly with people with learning disabilities in social care or in education, we almost have an expectation that they ought to be able to trust and to feel safe with each team member equally, and that somehow it's very, and honestly, like, you see teams, and it's like their goal is, we don't want them to become, like, I've even seen policies around children getting obsessed, or we don't want them to be over
Dependent, don't we?
dependency. Yeah, they talk about they're dependent on that staff member, or they're obsessed with that staff member, or they always want to be with that staff member. Like, that's a dysfunction, like something's gone wrong. And often the response to that is like, we're going to withdraw that staff member because the child has got dependent on them. It can get like unmanageable, and I have worked in places where it has become unmanageable. Um, and that then has to be some kind, but it needs to work from the place of attachment. Like, we don't call it attachment, we call it other things. I remember having a debate with a social worker recently, and she said, "Oh, I don't think young people with severe learning disabilities, they don't form attachments like everybody else. That's more of a dependency." And what she was commenting on was the fact that this was a young man who had 3 staff members in his life around whom he felt completely safe, like, you completely safe, and when they weren't there, he didn't feel so safe, and that was somehow treated as, yeah, as a dysfunction, or as something that was odd, and ascribed to his learning disability and his autism, whereas really all we were seeing was very similar to what you described with your boy.
Yeah. It makes me think so much about the people that are in my life. The fact actually, I can choose to say I have an attachment to them, or I can choose to say that I depend on them.
Yes.
So both of those comes with a vulnerability, because it
Yeah.
comes with the knowledge that I can't survive by myself.
Yeah.
And for that social worker, for many people to consider if this young person actually needs people around, because we all need people around,
Yeah.
that then means that I do as the adult here as well. And what is going to be the cost to me to consider actually I'm not as entirely self-sufficient as I would like to believe?
Yeah.
Because if I'm seeing this young person as fully human, and therefore needs attachment, needs
Yeah.
to depend on, I also need to see that.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And so there was this idea in the social worker's mind that these 3 staff that he was dependent on could be removed, and that they were fungible, that they could be removed from his life, and 3 more staff could be brought in who he would also be dependent upon, because it wasn't about the people, it was about he was just a dependent person. And it was, yeah, and I think we have to somehow unravel what it is that we think we're doing in this sector. What is it that we believe? What is the work that we're actually doing? Because if we are creating, if we're just bringing people in to do jobs, um, and treating them like barrels of oil,
Yeah.
then we will continually create loss of safety in these organisations because we don't allow and don't respect the fact that everybody needs people around them who they can feel safe with. That takes time, that takes relationships. It's not replaceable. It is, you can have more of it. So, one or two or three safe relationships build a pattern for further safe relationships. That's the principle of attachment. But it can't just be moved from one set of people to another. Um, and I think this is where this safety piece gets very specific, I think, in our sector. So, there is other sectors maybe where this doesn't get so complicated. But I think in this space with caring for people with severe learning disabilities who do need somebody, many of the young people we meet and work with, they need someone with them 24/7. So how do we do that in a way that recognises that they need to feel safe and that safety primarily comes not through any random person, but through a person they've built a safe relationship with? And therefore, we need to treat those staff who provide that, who are a safe person, or even if it's just one child, we need to treat them as gold, as with respect, and with value, much like you would treat, a mum or a dad, or this key worker for your boy. She's golden, isn't she? Like she's not. You don't want to just pull somebody else in. Oh well, if she leaves, fine. We'll just bring somebody else in. Yeah. So I guess that it gets very specific in this, and I think that's also why it's hard to translate into our space where we are, because that begins to feel difficult. And but I do also think that some of the attrition rates we have in the sector, where we have staff coming and going and coming and going, this is playing into it, because when you begin to do the work, you realize that you are doing relational work, and you realize that, these are young people that you're not going to want them. They've become such a big part of your life, and you don't want to leave. You don't want to leave the young people.
Yeah.
But if the organization continually treats you and responds to you as if you are just doing a job rather than creating safe relationships for a person, the person you're caring for, you can't stay, because it really begins to damage your soul, begins to damage what you're contributing. And so I think funnily enough, one of the outcomes of embedding trauma-informed care is that the rates of people leaving an organisation tend to go down. When we think about, so we can see why it makes sense. Yeah, yeah. And so I think, we say safety, 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 and it feels straightforward, but actually I think this is such a huge key for this work, for this complex work, and for the sector, because we are talking about the relationships that are right at the heart of it, and how we celebrate, protect, value, and honour the relational interests of the staff and the young people. The young people, they build that, they trust those, that they learn to trust particular people, and that's precious.
It's exciting, doesn't it?
Yeah, feels like we're getting back into the heart of what this is, of this work. Yeah. Well, yeah, good to talk about it. Okay, well, we'll leave it there today and pick up on another idea next time. Thanks, Jen.